The water was already boiling when Hannah Keller realized her mother-in-law had locked the kitchen door from the outside. Hannah pressed her hands against the rough wooden door, her heart beginning to race as she heard the key turn in the lock. She was 22 years old and had been married to Thomas Keller for 8 brutal months in Miles City, Montana, in the summer of 1882. The marriage had been arranged by her father to settle a debt, and from the moment she had arrived at the Keller ranch, Thomas's mother, Martha, and his sister Caroline had made it clear that Hannah would never be good enough for their precious son. "Please," Hannah called through the door, trying to keep her voice steady. "Let me out. I need to start the evening meal." Martha's cold voice came from the other side. "You will stay in there until you learn some respect, girl. My son deserves better than a lazy woman who cannot even keep a proper house." Hannah wanted to argue that she had scrubbed every floor, washed every dish, and tended every chore they demanded, but she had learned that defending herself only made things worse. She turned away from the door and walked toward the large black stove where the pot of water bubbled violently. She had been heating it to wash the floors, as Martha had instructed. The kitchen was stifling hot, the summer sun beating down on the roof and the stove adding its heat to the already oppressive air. She moved to open the window, needing air, needing relief from the heat. Her hands were shaking as she reached for the latch. Behind her, she heard the door unlock and swing open suddenly. Martha and Caroline stood there, their faces twisted with something Hannah could not quite name, but that sent ice through her veins despite the heat. "You think you can ignore us," Martha said, her voice low and dangerous. "You think you are too good to answer when we speak to you." "I did answer," Hannah said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I said I would stay as long as you wanted." "She is talking back," Caroline said, moving into the kitchen. She was 19, 3 years younger than Hannah, with the same cold eyes as her mother. "Mother, she is being disrespectful again." Hannah backed away, but the kitchen was small and there was nowhere to go. Her back hit the counter near the stove. Martha approached, and there was something in her expression that made Hannah's blood run cold. "Perhaps you need a lesson in humility," Martha said softly. "Perhaps you need to understand what real pain feels like so you will appreciate all that we do for you." Hannah saw Martha's hand reach for the pot handle. Time seemed to slow as she watched her mother-in-law lift the large pot of boiling water. Hannah tried to move, but Caroline grabbed her arms from behind, holding her in place. "This is for your own good," Martha said, and then she threw the boiling water directly onto Hannah's legs. The pain was beyond anything Hannah had ever imagined. She screamed, a sound that tore from her throat as the scalding water soaked through her skirt and burned her skin. Caroline released her and Hannah collapsed to the floor, her legs on fire with agony. She could not think, could not breathe, could only feel the searing, unbearable pain. "Clean up this mess," Martha said to Caroline, her voice perfectly calm. "And if she tells anyone what happened, we will say she was clumsy and spilled it herself. Who do you think they will believe? The respected Keller family or this worthless girl?" Through the haze of pain, Hannah heard them leave. She lay on the kitchen floor, her whole body shaking, tears streaming down her face. The pain in her legs was so intense she thought she might pass out. She wanted to pass out, wanted the darkness to take her away from this agony. She did not know how long she lay there. It could have been minutes or hours. Eventually, she heard the sound of horses outside and heavy footsteps on the porch. The kitchen door opened and she heard a sharp intake of breath. "Good God," a man's voice said, deep and rough with shock. "What happened here?" Hannah tried to focus through her tears. The man kneeling beside her was not her husband. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair and eyes that were a striking green even in her pain-blurred vision. She had seen him once before, weeks ago when he had stopped by the ranch to speak with Thomas about buying horses. His name was Garrett Quinn, and he was a cowboy who worked on the neighboring property. "The water," Hannah managed to whisper. "It burned me." Garrett looked at the overturned pot, then back at her legs. His jaw tightened. "This was not an accident," he said quietly. It was not a question. Hannah said nothing, but her silence was answer enough. Garrett stood up quickly and called out the door. "Samuel, get the wagon ready now. And bring clean blankets." "Please," Hannah said, panic cutting through the pain. "They will be angry. They said no one can know." "I do not give a damn what they said," Garrett replied, his voice hard as iron. "Your legs are badly burned. If these are not treated properly, you could lose them or worse. I am taking you to my place where I can care for you properly." "My husband." "Your husband is not here. I saw Thomas in town an hour ago, drunk as a skunk in the saloon. He was not planning on coming home tonight." Garrett's voice was grim. "And from the look of things, whoever did this to you was counting on that." A younger man appeared in the doorway, his eyes widening at the scene. "Boss, what? Do not ask questions right now, Samuel. Just help me get her to the wagon as gently as possible." Garrett removed his coat and laid it on the floor beside Hannah. "This is going to hurt," he told her, his voice gentler now. "But I need to get you out of here and somewhere I can treat these burns properly. Can you be brave for me?" Hannah nodded, though she was not sure she could be brave at all. When Garrett carefully slid his arms under her to lift her, the movement sent fresh waves of agony through her burned legs. She could not help the cry that escaped her lips. I know," Garrett murmured, holding her as gently as possible against his chest. "Just hold on. We will get you somewhere safe." He carried her out to the wagon where Samuel had spread several blankets in the bed. Garrett laid her down with infinite care, then climbed up beside her. "Take us home," he told Samuel, "and ride fast but smooth. Samuel, when we get there, have Maria heat water and gather all the clean cloth she can find, and send someone to fetch old Doc Peterson if he is still at the Miller Ranch." The wagon began to move, and every jolt sent pain shooting through Hannah's body. She bit her lip to keep from crying out, tasting blood. Garrett positioned himself to shield her from the worst of the bumps, one hand bracing her shoulder. "You are going to be all right," he said firmly, as if he could make it true by sheer force of will. "I have treated burns before on men and horses both. The first few days will be the worst, but if we care for them properly, they will heal." "Why are you helping me?" Hannah whispered. "You barely know me." Garrett's green eyes met hers, and there was a fierceness in them that took her breath away. "Because no one deserves what was done to you, and because I will not stand by and let someone suffer when I have the means to help." The ride to Garrett's ranch took nearly 30 minutes, and by the time they arrived, Hannah was drifting in and out of consciousness from the pain. She had vague impressions of being carried again, of being brought into a house that smelled of wood smoke and leather, of being laid on a soft bed in a room with whitewashed walls. A woman's voice, warm and concerned, speaking rapidly in Spanish. "Maria," Hannah thought distantly. Garrett's housekeeper. Then Garrett's steady voice giving instructions. "We need to remove her skirt and petticoats to see the burns. Maria, can you help her with that while I prepare the treatment?" Hannah wanted to protest, wanted to say that it was not proper, but the pain was too great. She felt Maria's gentle hands helping her, heard her soft murmurs of sympathy and rage when she saw the extent of the burns. "Dios mío," Maria breathed. "Who would do such a thing?" "Someone who will answer for it," Garrett said grimly. "But first we save her legs." Hannah felt cool air on her burned skin as the fabric was removed. And then there was a moment of terrible anticipation before Garrett began to apply something to the burns. She expected more pain, but instead there was a strange cooling sensation. "It is a paste made from aloe and other herbs," Garrett explained, his voice calm and steady even as his hands worked with practiced efficiency. "An old Apache woman taught me how to make it years ago when I got burned in a prairie fire. It will help with the pain and keep the burns from getting infected." Hannah watched through half-closed eyes as he worked. His hands were large and rough, the hands of a man who spent his life working with horses and cattle. But they moved with surprising gentleness as he spread the paste over her burned legs. His face was set in concentration, his jaw tight, and Hannah realized that he was deeply angry about what had happened to her. "There are blisters forming," Garrett said to Maria. "We need to keep them clean and covered. Change the wrappings twice a day and reapply the paste each time. And she will need water, as much as she can drink, and broth to keep her strength up." "I will care for her like my own daughter," Maria promised. "But Señor Garrett, her husband, will come looking for her." "Let him come," Garrett said flatly. "He will have to go through me to get to her." Over the next few days, Hannah drifted in and out of feverish sleep. The burns had been severe, covering most of her lower legs from her knees down. Garrett was right that the first days were the worst. The pain was constant and intense, and despite the paste he applied, there were times when she could not help but cry out. But through it all, Garrett was there. He changed her bandages himself, his touch always gentle despite his rough exterior. He spooned broth into her mouth when she was too weak to feed herself. He sat beside her bed during the long nights when the pain was worst, talking to her in that deep, steady voice, telling her stories about horses he had broken, cattle drives he had been on, the wide open country he loved. "Why are you doing all this?" Hannah asked him one night when she was more lucid than she had been. "You should be out with your men working your ranch. Instead, you are here playing nursemaid to me." Garrett looked at her for a long moment, his green eyes serious. "My men can handle things for a while, and you needed someone. Besides," he added with a slight smile, "I am not sure nursemaid is quite the right word for me." Despite everything, Hannah found herself almost smiling back. "No, I suppose not. You are much too rough around the edges for that." "There, you see, you still have your spirit. That is a good sign." The smile faded from Hannah's face. "My husband will come eventually. The Kellers will want me back, even if only to make my life more miserable." "Let me worry about that," Garrett said. "Right now, you just focus on healing." But Hannah could not stop worrying. She had been at Garrett's ranch for 5 days when Thomas finally appeared. Hannah was sitting up in bed for the first time, carefully sipping tea that Maria had brought her, when she heard angry voices from the front of the house. "I demand to see my wife." Thomas's voice, slurred and belligerent. "You have no right to keep her here." "I have every right when she was brought to me with her legs burned so badly she could barely speak." Garrett's voice was calm but hard as stone. "Where were you when she needed help?" "Oh, that is right, you were passed out drunk in town. What happens in my house is my business, not when what happens is someone torturing your wife with boiling water." There was a moment of silence. Then Thomas said, his voice uncertain, "She must have had an accident." "My mother said." "Your mother is a liar, and we both know it. Those burns did not happen by accident." Hannah heard footsteps approaching the bedroom, and then Thomas burst through the door. He looked terrible, unshaven and disheveled, his eyes bloodshot. When he saw Hannah sitting up in bed, he stopped short. "Hannah, you need to come home now," he said, but there was no real authority in his voice. "She is not going anywhere until her legs are healed," Garrett said from the doorway. "And maybe not even then." Thomas turned on him, his face flushing with anger. "You cannot keep my wife from me. I can and I will if returning to your ranch means she will be hurt again." My mother would never. Your mother threw boiling water on her legs, Thomas. I saw the burns. I saw where it happened. This was not an accident, and you know it. Thomas's face went pale, and for a moment Hannah saw something that might have been guilt in his eyes, but then he shook his head stubbornly. Even if that were true, she is still my wife. She belongs at home with me. I belong wherever I choose to be, Hannah said quietly. Both men turned to look at her in surprise. She met her husband's eyes steadily despite her fear. I will not go back to that house, Thomas, not while your mother and sister are there. They have made it clear they want me gone, and apparently they are willing to hurt me badly to make that happen. But you are my wife, Thomas repeated, as if that settled everything. A wife you have barely spoken to in 8 months, Hannah replied, her voice growing stronger. A wife you leave alone with people who hate her while you drink away your nights in town. Whatever obligation I had to you ended when your mother burned me and you did nothing to protect me. Thomas opened his mouth, closed it, then tried again. Where will you go? You have no money, no family nearby. She will stay here until she is healed, Garrett said firmly. After that, what she does is her choice, not yours and certainly not your mother's. Thomas looked between them, and Hannah saw something ugly cross his face. People will talk, he said. They will say you are unfaithful, living here with another man. Let them talk, Hannah said, surprised by her own courage. I would rather be thought unfaithful than actually dead, which is what would have happened if Garrett had not found me. Thomas stared at her for another long moment, then turned and stalked out. They heard the front door slam, and then the sound of his horse galloping away. Garrett came into the room and sat down in the chair beside the bed. That was brave, he said quietly. But he will be back, and next time he may not come alone. I know, Hannah said, and she did. Thomas would go home and tell his mother what had happened, and Martha would not let this stand. I am sorry to bring this trouble to your door. You did not bring anything, Garrett said firmly. They did, and whatever comes, we will face it together. It was the we that made Hannah's heart skip unexpectedly. She looked at Garrett, really looked at him, and saw not just the rough cowboy who had saved her, but a man of deep integrity and surprising gentleness. A man who had sat by her bedside for days, who had tended her burns with his own hands, who had defended her against her own husband without expecting anything in return. Why are you really doing this? She asked softly. There must be more to it than just wanting to help someone in need. Garrett was quiet for a moment, his green eyes thoughtful. When I first saw you at the Keller ranch 2 months ago, you looked so sad, he said finally. Like you were carrying the weight of the world, and I thought, that is a woman who deserves better. I did not think I would ever have the chance to do anything about it, but when I found you on that kitchen floor. He paused, his jaw tightening. I could not just walk away, I would not. Thank you, Hannah whispered, for everything. You do not need to thank me, just focus on getting better. Over the following weeks, Hannah did get better. The burns healed slowly, and there were times when the pain was so intense she wanted to give up. But Garrett was always there, changing her bandages, applying the healing paste, encouraging her when she felt hopeless. The blisters are starting to heal, he told her 2 weeks after the incident. There will be scars. I will not lie to you about that, but you will walk again, Hannah. You will be strong again. As her body healed, Hannah found herself learning more about the man who had saved her. Garrett was 30 years old, 8 years her senior. He had come to Montana 5 years earlier with nothing but a horse and a saddle, and through hard work and determination, he had built up a small but successful ranch. He bred horses primarily, with a small herd of cattle on the side. I always loved horses, he told her one afternoon as he helped her sit up in bed. Even as a boy back in Texas, I would rather spend time with horses than people. They are honest creatures. They do not lie or pretend to be something they are not. Is that why you never married? Hannah asked, then immediately felt embarrassed. I am sorry, that was too forward. No, it is all right, Garrett said with a slight smile. The truth is, I never met a woman I wanted to build a life with. The women in town always seemed more interested in what I could provide than who I actually was. And I did not want a marriage like that, one based on convenience rather than true partnership. Hannah thought about her own marriage, arranged to pay off a debt, and felt a deep sadness. I wish I had been given that choice, she said softly. Garrett's expression grew serious. You have choices now, Hannah. Once you are healed, you can decide what you want your life to be. But even as Hannah grew stronger physically, the situation with the Kellers grew more complicated. Thomas came back twice more, each time demanding that Hannah return home. Each time, Garrett sent him away. The second time, Thomas was accompanied by the town sheriff, a friend of the Keller family. Mrs. Keller, this is highly irregular, Sheriff Morrison said, standing awkwardly in the bedroom doorway. A wife's place is with her husband. Even when that husband's family tried to kill her, Garrett asked coldly. The sheriff shifted uncomfortably. Mrs. Keller, what exactly happened to your legs? Hannah met his eyes steadily. My mother-in-law threw boiling water on them deliberately while my sister-in-law held me still. They told me that if I said anything, they would claim it was an accident and that no one would believe me. The sheriff's face grew red. That is a serious accusation. It is a serious crime, Garrett said, and I saw the evidence with my own eyes. Those burns were not caused by any accident. Still, without proof, I am the proof, Hannah said firmly. I am the one who was burned, and I am telling you what happened. If you will not do anything about it, then at least do not force me to go back to the place where I was hurt. The sheriff looked helplessly between Hannah and Garrett, then at Thomas, who stood in the hallway looking sullen. Mr. Keller, perhaps it would be best if your wife remained here while she recovers. Once she is fully healed, we can discuss the matter further. That is unacceptable, Thomas protested. It is the best I can do, the sheriff said firmly. I will not force an injured woman out of a sick, no matter what the circumstances. After they left, Hannah let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. That will not be the end of it, she said. I know, Garrett agreed, but we bought some time. As August turned to September, Hannah's burns continued to heal. The blisters had finally subsided, leaving pink, tender new skin and, as Garrett had warned, scars. But she was able to stand now, and with Garrett's support, she could take a few painful steps. That is it, Garrett encouraged, his arm steady around her waist as she took another trembling step across the bedroom. You are doing beautifully. Hannah gritted her teeth against the pain and took another step. Her legs felt weak and the new skin pulled uncomfortably, but she was walking. She was healing. I never thought I would be able to do this, she admitted, leaning against Garrett for support. There were nights when the pain was so bad I thought I would rather die than go on. But you did not die, Garrett said softly. You fought and you survived. You are stronger than you know, Hannah. She looked up at him, suddenly very aware of how close they were, his arm around her, her body pressed against his side. His green eyes met hers and something passed between them, something that made Hannah's breath catch. Garrett, she whispered. I know, he said quietly. I feel it too, but I am still married. Even if it is a terrible marriage, even if I never want to go back, I am still legally Thomas's wife. Then we will find a way to change that, Garrett said with quiet determination. If you want to. If this is not just gratitude speaking. Hannah thought about that, really thought about it. Was what she felt for Garrett just gratitude for saving her life? Or was it something more? She realized that over the past weeks, she had come to depend on more than just his medical care. She looked forward to his visits, to their conversations, to the way he treated her like a person whose thoughts and feelings mattered. She loved his quiet strength, his gentleness, the way he could make her feel safe even when everything else was uncertain. "It is not just gratitude," she said finally. "I do not know exactly what it is, but I know it is more than that." Garrett's face lit up with a smile that transformed his usually serious features. "Then we will figure this out together. I promise you, Hannah, you will never have to be afraid again." But promises, Hannah was learning, were easier to make than to keep. 2 days later, the Kellers came in force. Not just Thomas this time, but his mother Martha, his sister Caroline, and 3 ranch hands. Garrett was out checking on the horses when they arrived, and Hannah was in the kitchen with Maria, carefully practicing walking with the support of a cane Garrett had made for her. Maria saw them first and immediately moved to stand between Hannah and the door. "You are not welcome here," she said firmly. Martha pushed past her with surprising strength for a woman in her 50s. "We are taking back what belongs to us," she said coldly. Hannah backed away, her heart racing, but her legs were still too weak to run. Thomas entered behind his mother, looking uncomfortable but determined. "Hannah, this has gone on long enough," he said. "You need to come home." "I told you I am not going back there," Hannah said, trying to keep her voice steady despite her fear. "You do not have a choice," Martha said. "You are my son's wife and you will do your duty." "My duty?" Hannah felt anger flare through her fear. "You tried to cripple me. You deliberately burned me and then expected me to just accept it." "I was teaching you respect," Martha said coldly, "something you clearly still lack. But we will deal with that at home." The ranch hands moved forward, clearly intending to take Hannah by force. Maria tried to stop them, but she was one small woman against 3 large men. One of them grabbed Hannah's arm, and pain shot through her legs as she tried to pull away. "Let her go." Maria shouted. "You stay out of this, old woman," Caroline said viciously. But before the ranch hand could drag Hannah toward the door, there was the sound of running footsteps, and then Garrett burst into the kitchen. His face was dark with fury, and he moved with startling speed for such a large man. He grabbed the ranch hand holding Hannah and threw him backward into the wall with enough force to make the whole house shake. "Get your hands off her," Garrett said, his voice dangerously quiet. The other 2 ranch hands moved toward him, but Garrett was ready. He was outnumbered, but he had rage and righteousness on his side. The fight was brief and brutal, ending with all 3 ranch hands either on the floor or backing away, nursing bloody noses and bruised ribs. Garrett turned to face Martha and Thomas, his chest heaving. "Get off my property," he said. "Now, this is not over," Martha hissed. "That girl belongs to my son." "That woman," Garrett emphasized, "belongs to no one but herself, and if you ever try to hurt her again, you will answer to me. Now get out before I forget that I was raised to be polite to ladies, even ones who do not deserve the courtesy." Martha's face went purple with rage, but she turned and stalked out. Caroline followed, shooting Hannah a look of pure hatred. Thomas lingered for a moment. "I am sorry," he said quietly, looking at Hannah. "I never meant for any of this to happen." "Then you should have stood up to your mother," Hannah replied. "You should have protected me. That is what a husband is supposed to do." Thomas flinched as if she had struck him, then turned and left without another word. When they were gone, Hannah's legs gave out. Garrett caught her before she could fall, lifting her gently into his arms. "I have got you," he murmured. "You are safe." But Hannah was shaking, the fear and adrenaline of the confrontation catching up with her. "They will not stop," she whispered. "They will keep coming back. Then we need to make sure they cannot legally force you to return," Garrett said, carrying her back to her bedroom. "Tomorrow, I will take you to town to speak with a lawyer. We will see about getting your marriage annulled or dissolved." On what grounds? Hannah asked. He was not unfaithful, and I cannot prove abuse since no one witnessed what Martha and Caroline did. Abandonment, Garrett said. He left you alone with people who hurt you, and he has failed in his duty to protect and provide for you. Any decent judge would see that as grounds for ending the marriage. The next morning, despite her legs still being weak and painful, Hannah insisted on going to town. Garrett helped her into the wagon, surrounding her with blankets despite the warm September day. Samuel drove while Garrett sat in the back with Hannah, his presence solid and reassuring. Miles City was a growing town, booming with the cattle trade that had made Montana prosperous. The streets were dusty and crowded, full of cowboys and merchants and families going about their business. More than a few people stared as Garrett helped Hannah down from the wagon, supporting her as she walked with her cane. The lawyer's office was above the general store, and the climb up the stairs was agonizing for Hannah. But Garrett was patient, helping her up one step at a time, never rushing her. Cyrus Waverly was an older man with kind eyes and a reputation for fairness. He listened carefully as Hannah told him everything, from her arranged marriage to the attack in the kitchen to Thomas's failure to protect her. "This is indeed a troubling case," Mr. Waverly said when she finished. "The Keller family is well connected in this town, which will make things difficult. However, the law is clear that a husband has a duty to protect his wife from harm. If he failed in that duty, that could be grounds for a legal separation at minimum." "How long would that take?" Garrett asked. "Months, possibly longer. And Mrs. Keller would need somewhere safe to stay during that time, somewhere her husband and his family cannot reach her." "She will stay with me," Garrett said firmly. "I will keep her safe." Mr. Waverly looked between them, his expression thoughtful. "That could complicate matters. If the Kellers claim that Mrs. Keller has been unfaithful, she has not been," Garrett interrupted. "I have treated her injuries, nothing more. My housekeeper Maria has been present the entire time as a chaperone." "I believe you," Mr. Waverly said. "But the court may not. However, let me file the papers and see what we can do. In the meantime, Mrs. Keller, you should stay away from the Keller ranch and avoid being alone in public where they might try to take you by force." As they left the lawyer's office, Hannah felt a mixture of hope and dread. She was taking steps to free herself from Thomas, but she knew the battle was far from over. "Thank you," she said to Garrett as he helped her back into the wagon, "for everything. I know this is putting you in a difficult position." "You are worth the difficulty," Garrett said simply. "Besides, I meant what I said before. We are in this together now." As the weeks passed and September turned to October, Hannah's legs continued to heal. The scars would always be there, a permanent reminder of what had been done to her, but the pain was much less now, and she could walk without the cane for short distances. More importantly, she was growing stronger in other ways. Living at Garrett's ranch, away from the constant criticism and fear of the Keller household, she was rediscovering who she was beyond the frightened, abused wife she had become. She helped Maria in the kitchen, learning to cook the Mexican dishes that reminded the housekeeper of her home in Texas. She spent time in the stable, watching Garrett work with his horses and gradually learning to help him. The animals seemed to sense her gentleness, and Garrett said she had a natural way with them. "You could be a good horsewoman," he told her one crisp October afternoon as she helped him brush down a beautiful chestnut mare, "if you wanted to learn to ride." "Would you teach me?" Hannah asked. "I would be honored to," Garrett said, and the smile he gave her made her heart flutter. But it was not just the practical skills she was learning. She was also learning what it felt like to be treated with respect and kindness. Garrett never raised his voice to her, never criticized or belittled her. He asked her opinion on things and actually listened to her answers. He made her feel valued, important, seen, and somewhere along the way, gratitude had definitely turned into something deeper. Hannah found herself watching for Garrett's return when he went out to work. She loved the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the sound of his laugh when something amused him, the gentle strength in his hands when he helped her. She thought about him constantly, and when they were together, she felt a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with the Montana sun. One evening in late October, they were sitting on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. The air was cool, promising winter to come, and Garrett had draped a blanket around Hannah's shoulders. "Your legs are healing beautifully," he said, looking at where her skirt covered the scars he knew so well from treating them. "How do they feel?" "Much better," Hannah said. "There is still some tenderness, especially when the weather changes, but nothing like the pain before." "You saved my legs, Garrett. The doctor said so when he finally came to check on me. If you had not treated the burns so quickly and carefully, I could have lost them to infection." "I only did what anyone would have done." "No," Hannah said firmly. "You did far more than most people would have. You opened your home to a married woman, knowing it would cause scandal. You defended me against my husband's family. You spent weeks caring for me when you could have just sent me to the doctor and washed your hands of the whole situation. You are a good man, Garrett Quinn. Perhaps the best man I have ever known." Garrett was quiet for a moment, his eyes on the darkening sky. "You make me want to be better than I am," he said finally. "From the moment I met you, even before all this happened, I have wanted to be the kind of man who deserves a woman like you." Hannah's breath caught. "Garrett, I know we have to wait," he said quickly. "I know you are still legally married and we have to do things properly, but I need you to know, Hannah, that I love you. I think I have loved you from the first moment I saw you looking so lost at the Keller ranch. And when this is all resolved, when you are finally free, I want to court you properly. I want to give you the kind of marriage you should have had from the beginning, one based on love and respect and partnership." Tears sprang to Hannah's eyes. "I love you too," she whispered. "I tried not to, tried to tell myself it was just gratitude or circumstance, but it is not. I love you, Garrett. You have shown me what real kindness looks like, what it means to be valued and protected. You have given me hope when I thought I had none left." Garrett reached out and took her hand, his thumb stroking gently across her knuckles. "Then we will wait as long as we have to. But know that at the end of it, I want to marry you. I want to spend the rest of my life making sure you never doubt how precious you are." Hannah squeezed his hand, unable to speak through her tears. They sat together as the sun finished setting and the stars began to appear, hands joined, hearts full of love and hope for the future. But the road to that future was not smooth. The legal proceedings dragged on through November and into December. The Kellers fought every step of the way, using their connections and money to slow down the process. Thomas refused to agree to any separation, and Martha spread vicious rumors through town about Hannah's supposed infidelity. "They are saying terrible things," Maria reported after a trip to town for supplies. "They say you abandoned your husband for another man, that you made up lies about your burns to justify running away." Hannah felt sick. "Will people believe them?" "Some will," Maria admitted. "The Kellers have lived here for many years and they have many friends. But others remember what Martha is like, how mean she can be. And Senor Garrett is also well respected. Many people believe him when he tells them what really happened." The situation came to a head in mid-December. Hannah was in the stable helping Garrett feed the horses when they heard riders approaching fast. Garrett immediately tensed, his hand going to the rifle he kept nearby. "Go to the house," he told Hannah. "Lock yourself in with Maria." But before Hannah could move, Thomas burst into the stable, this time with nearly a dozen men behind him. His face was flushed with alcohol and anger, and he pointed at Hannah with a shaking hand. "There, that is my wife. I am taking her home where she belongs." Garrett stepped between Thomas and Hannah. "She is not going anywhere with you. The lawyer has filed papers." "I do not care about any papers," Thomas shouted. "She is my wife by law and by God, and you have no right to keep her from me." "The right of a human being not to be abused trumps your legal claim," Garrett said coldly. "Now turn around and go home before this gets ugly." Thomas laughed bitterly. "Ugly? You think you can stop all of us? I have brought enough men to drag both of you out if necessary." Garrett's jaw tightened, and Hannah saw him calculating the odds. He was fast and strong, but he was still just one man against a dozen. But before the situation could explode into violence, there was the sound of more horses arriving. Samuel and the other ranch hands from Garrett's property rode into the yard, along with several of the neighboring ranchers. Hannah recognized old Mr. Morrison from the adjacent property, and the Davis brothers who had a spread to the south. "Seems like you are not the only one who can gather men, Keller," Samuel called out. "And unlike yours, ours are sober." Mr. Morrison rode his horse right up to Thomas. "Boy, I have known your family for 20 years, and I have watched you grow from a decent child into a drunk disappointment. Now I hear you let your mother and sister torture your wife, and instead of making it right, you are trying to drag her back for more abuse. That is not how we do things in Montana." "This is none of your business," Thomas said, but his voice had lost some of its bluster. "It became our business when you brought a mob to threaten a good man on his own property," one of the Davis brothers said. "Garrett Quinn is our friend and neighbor. You want to get to him, you will have to go through all of us." Thomas looked around at the men facing him, and Hannah saw the moment he realized he was outnumbered and outmatched. His shoulders slumped, and suddenly he looked less like a threat and more like a lost, pathetic young man. "Why her?" he asked, looking at Garrett. "What is so special about her that you would risk everything?" "Everything that your mother and sister tried to destroy in her," Garrett replied. "Her kindness, her courage, her gentle heart. Hannah is special because she survived what they did to her and still has the strength to fight for a better life, and I am honored to stand beside her while she does it." Thomas looked at Hannah then, really looked at her, and she saw tears in his eyes. "I am sorry," he said, his voice breaking. "I know I should have protected you from them. I know I failed you as a husband. I was just so weak, so unable to stand up to my mother. But that does not excuse what I let happen to you." Hannah felt an unexpected pang of sympathy. Thomas had been a victim in his own way, crushed under Martha's domineering personality. But that did not change what had happened or what she needed to do. "Then let me go," she said softly. "Agree to the separation, Thomas. Let both of us have a chance at a better life." For a long moment, Thomas stood there struggling with himself. Then, finally, he nodded. "All right. I will tell my lawyer to stop fighting it. You are free, Hannah. I hope you find the happiness I could not give you." He turned and walked away, and after a moment, the men with him followed. They rode off into the gathering darkness, and Hannah felt as if an enormous weight had been lifted from her shoulders. Garrett put his arm around her, and she leaned into his warmth. "It is almost over," he murmured. "Just a little longer." The legal proceedings moved much faster after Thomas agreed to cooperate. By early February of 1883, the separation was finalized. Hannah was no longer Mrs. Thomas Keller. She was Hannah Kelsey again, free to make her own choices about her life. On a cold but bright February morning, Garrett came to find Hannah in the kitchen where she was helping Maria bake bread. His expression was serious, and for a moment Hannah's heart sank, afraid something had gone wrong. "Could you come with me?" Garrett asked. "There is something I want to show you." He helped her into her coat and led her outside. Her legs had healed completely now, though she still bore the scars and probably always would. But she could walk and run and ride, and that was a miracle she never took for granted. Garrett led her to the paddock where his finest horses grazed. In the center of the field stood a beautiful bay mare with a white star on her forehead. "She is yours," Garrett said. "I have been training her for months now, and she is as gentle and kind as they come. I thought if you want to truly be a horsewoman, you should have a horse of your own." Hannah was speechless. "Garrett, I cannot accept—" "Yes, you can," he interrupted gently. "You can and you will, because you deserve beautiful things, Hannah. You deserve to be given gifts without expecting anything in return. You deserve to be cherished." Hannah felt tears spilling down her cheeks. "Thank you. She is beautiful. What is her name?" "I was hoping you would name her," Garrett said. Hannah thought for a moment, looking at the gentle mare. "Hope," she said finally. "I will call her Hope, because you gave me hope when I had lost all of mine." Garrett smiled and pulled her into his arms. "Now that you are legally free, I have a question to ask you." He pulled back enough to look into her eyes, his own green gaze intense and full of love. "Hannah Kelsey, will you allow me to court you properly? Will you give me the chance to show you every day how much I love you and how much you mean to me?" "Yes," Hannah said, laughing through her tears. "Yes, absolutely yes." Garrett whooped with joy and spun her around, making her laugh harder. When he set her down, he cupped her face in his hands and looked at her as if she was the most precious thing in the world. "I am going to make you so happy," he promised. "I am going to spend every day making sure you never regret choosing me." "I could never regret it," Hannah said. "You saved my life, Garrett, not just from the burns, but from a life of fear and pain. You showed me what love really looks like." The courtship that followed was the happiest time of Hannah's life. Garrett courted her with old-fashioned propriety, taking her on chaperoned picnics and buggy rides, bringing her flowers and sitting with her on the porch in the evenings talking about everything and nothing. But there was also passion beneath the propriety, stolen kisses when Maria was not looking, and the heat in Garrett's eyes when he looked at her that promised a future full of love and desire. By early spring, Garrett could not wait any longer. One April evening, as they sat together watching the sunset, he got down on one knee and pulled out a small velvet box. "Hannah Kelsey, you are the strongest, bravest, most beautiful woman I have ever known. You have made my house into a home and my life into something worth living. Would you do me the incredible honor of becoming my wife?" The ring inside the box was a simple gold band with a small diamond, nothing fancy but absolutely perfect. Hannah could barely see it through her tears of joy. "Yes," she said, pulling Garrett to his feet so she could throw her arms around him. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." They were married in late May of 1883, almost exactly a year after Hannah's burns had healed. The wedding was small but joyful, held at the ranch with their closest friends and neighbors in attendance. Maria cried happy tears throughout the ceremony, and even tough old Mr. Morrison had to wipe his eyes. Hannah wore a simple white dress that Maria had helped her sew, and she carried wildflowers picked from the meadow that morning. When Garrett saw her walking toward him, his face lit up with such love and joy that Hannah felt her heart might burst from happiness. "You are so beautiful," he whispered as she reached his side. "And you are mine," Hannah whispered back. "Finally, truly mine." They exchanged vows in front of the preacher, promising to love and cherish each other through whatever trials life might bring. When Garrett kissed her as his wife, Hannah felt a sense of rightness settle deep in her bones. This was where she belonged. This was home. The reception was lively, with music and dancing and more food than anyone could eat. Hannah danced with her husband, her legs strong beneath her, her heart full of joy. When Garrett swept her into his arms for a waltz, she looked up at him with all the love she felt shining in her eyes. "Thank you," she said, "for everything. For saving me, for loving me, for giving me this beautiful life." "You saved me too," Garrett said seriously. "Before you, I was just existing, going through the motions. You taught me what it means to truly live, to have someone to share every moment with. You are my heart, Hannah. You always will be." That night, as Garrett carried her over the threshold of their bedroom, Hannah marveled at how much her life had changed. A year ago, she had been lying on a kitchen floor in agony, believing she had no future worth living. Now she was married to a man she loved deeply, standing on legs that had healed against all odds, with a whole lifetime of happiness stretching out before her. Garrett set her down gently and looked at her with an expression that made her breath catch. "I love you, Mrs. Quinn," he said softly. "I love you too," Hannah replied. "My husband, my savior, my heart." As Garrett drew her into his arms and kissed her, Hannah sent a silent prayer of thanks to whatever force had led her to this moment, to this man, to this life. The scars on her legs would always be there, a reminder of the darkness she had survived. But they were also a reminder of Garrett's gentle hands treating her burns, of his unwavering support during her recovery, of the love that had grown between them during those long months of healing. The years that followed were everything Hannah had dreamed of and more. She and Garrett built a life together filled with love, laughter, and hard work. She became an accomplished horsewoman, helping Garrett train and breed their horses. She learned the business side of ranching too, and Garrett valued her input on every major decision. In the spring of 1884, Hannah discovered she was pregnant. Garrett was over the moon with joy, treating her like she was made of spun glass. Hannah laughed at his overprotectiveness, but secretly loved how much he cared. Their first child was a son, born in December of 1884. They named him Gabriel Thomas Quinn, and he had his father's green eyes and his mother's gentle spirit. Garrett cried when he held his son for the first time, overcome with the miracle of this new life. "Thank you," he whispered to Hannah as she lay exhausted but radiant in their bed. "Thank you for this gift, for our son, for everything." Hannah smiled and touched his face. "We made him together, just like we are building this life together. I could not imagine doing any of this with anyone but you." 2 years later, they had a daughter whom they named Grace Maria Quinn, after the Grace that had brought them together and the housekeeper who had become like a mother to Hannah. Grace had Hannah's brown hair and Garrett's fierce determination. Over the years, they heard occasional news about the Kellers. Thomas eventually moved away from Miles City, trying to start fresh somewhere his mother's shadow did not loom so large. Martha and Caroline remained bitter, but they had learned to keep their distance after Hannah had made it clear she would press charges if they ever came near her family. Hannah never forgot what had been done to her, but she did not let it define her. The scars on her legs were a part of her story, but they were not the whole story. The whole story was about survival and healing, about finding love in the darkest moment, about a cowboy with gentle hands and a fierce heart who had treated her burns for months until she healed, and then had spent the rest of his life making sure she never felt pain like that again. On their 10th wedding anniversary in 1893, Garrett surprised Hannah with a trip back to the spot where they had first met, the old Keller ranch. It had been sold years ago to a young family from back east, and they had transformed it into something warm and welcoming. "Why did you bring me here?" Hannah asked, looking at the house that held such terrible memories. "Because I wanted you to see it transformed," Garrett said. "That place was where you suffered, but it was also where our story began. I wanted you to see that darkness can be overcome, that places where bad things happened can become places of light again. Just like you did, my love. You took the darkness of what was done to you and transformed it into something beautiful. Hannah leaned against her husband, watching their children play in the yard of the house that no longer held any power over her. "You are right," she said. "We took something broken and made it whole. We took pain and turned it into joy." "We did it together," Garrett said, kissing the top of her head. "The way we do everything. The way we always will." As the sun set over the Montana landscape, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Hannah reflected on the long journey that had brought her to this moment. The burns had healed, the scars had faded to silver lines on her skin, and the cowboy who had saved her life had become the love of her life. She had survived, she had healed, and she had found a happiness she never could have imagined during those dark days when she thought she would never walk again. Years continued to pass, bringing more joy than sorrow. Gabriel grew into a strong young man who shared his father's love of horses and his mother's kind heart. Grace became a spirited girl who could outride most of the ranch hands by the time she was 12. In 1895, Hannah gave birth to another son, Henry James Quinn, who had his mother's gentle nature and became the family's peacemaker. The ranch prospered under Hannah and Garrett's combined management. They became known throughout Montana not just for their fine horses, but for their fairness and kindness. Young couples starting out would often come to them for advice, and Hannah always told them the same thing. A good marriage is built on respect, trust, and partnership. Never settle for less than someone who treats you like you are precious, because you are. Maria remained with them for many years, becoming a beloved grandmother figure to the children. She taught them to cook, told them stories of her childhood in Texas, and always had a warm tortilla and a listening ear when they needed it. When she finally passed away peacefully in her sleep in 1899, the whole family mourned her as the treasure she had been. On their 20th anniversary in 1903, Garrett and Hannah took a rare evening alone, sitting on the porch they had sat on so many times before. They were older now, lines on their faces and silver threading through their hair, but the love between them burned as bright as ever. "Do you ever think about how different things could have been?" Hannah asked, her hand in Garrett's as always. "If you had not come by the ranch that day, if you had not helped me?" "Every day," Garrett said seriously. "And every day I thank God that I did." "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Hannah. These 20 years with you have been the greatest gift of my life. Even with all the hardship, the struggles of ranching, the difficult years, the times when money was tight, especially with all that," Garrett said firmly. "Because we faced it together. There was never a moment when I felt alone, never a problem we could not solve as a team. You have been my partner in the truest sense, Hannah. My equal, my helpmate, my love." Hannah lifted their joined hands and kissed his knuckles. "I never thought I would know what real love felt like. I thought marriage was supposed to be an obligation, a duty to endure. But you showed me it could be joy. You showed me that love is not just words but actions, day after day, year after year, choosing each other over and over again." "And I will keep choosing you," Garrett promised, "every day for the rest of our lives." As they sat together watching the stars come out, surrounded by the life they had built together, Hannah thought about the girl she had been 21 years ago, lying on a kitchen floor with her legs burned, thinking her life was over. She wished she could go back and tell that girl that she was wrong, that the darkest moment would become the doorway to the greatest happiness. She would tell her about the cowboy with green eyes who would treat her burns with such gentleness, who would defend her when she was too weak to defend herself, who would love her with a devotion that never wavered. But that girl was gone, transformed by fire and pain into the woman Hannah had become. A woman who knew her own strength, who had survived the unsurvivable, who had found love in the ashes of her old life and built something beautiful from it. The children grew and eventually began families of their own. Gabriel married a sweet schoolteacher from town and gave Hannah and Garrett their first grandchildren. Grace surprised everyone by becoming one of the finest horse trainers in Montana, eventually taking over much of that aspect of the ranch business. Henry went east to study law, determined to help people who found themselves in situations like his mother had been in, trapped in dangerous marriages with no way out. Through it all, Hannah and Garrett remained each other's constant. They grew old together, their love deepening with every passing year. The scars on Hannah's legs faded to pale shadows, barely visible unless you knew to look for them. But Hannah never forgot what they represented, not just the cruelty that had caused them, but the love that had healed them. In the autumn of 1915, as Hannah and Garrett sat together on their porch at sunset, both in their 60s now but still holding hands like newlyweds, Hannah turned to her husband with a soft smile. "You know what today is?" she asked. Garrett thought for a moment, then his eyes widened. 33 years since the day I found you," he said softly. 33 years since you came into my life and changed everything. 33 years since you saved me," Hannah corrected. "Not just my legs, but my whole life. You gave me hope when I had none. You gave me love when I thought I was unlovable. You gave me a family, a home, a life beyond anything I could have dreamed." "We gave each other those things," Garrett said, pulling her close. "I was half alive before you, Hannah. You brought color and meaning to my existence. Every day with you has been a gift." Hannah rested her head on his shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of him, of leather and horses and home. Around them, their grandchildren played in the yard, their laughter ringing out in the clear evening air. Inside the house, she could hear their children talking and laughing, preparing dinner. This was what healing looked like, Hannah thought. Not just skin knitting back together, but a whole life rebuilt. A family created from nothing but love and determination. A happiness earned through surviving the darkness together. "I love you," she whispered to Garrett. "I have loved you from the moment you lifted me from that kitchen floor and promised I would heal, and I will love you until my last breath and beyond." "And I love you," Garrett replied, kissing her forehead. "My brave, beautiful Hannah. My wife, my partner, my heart. You are the best decision I ever made, the greatest adventure I ever embarked on. Thank you for choosing me, for trusting me, for building this life with me." As the sun dipped below the horizon and the stars began to appear, Hannah felt a profound sense of peace. The journey from that terrible day in August of 1882 to this perfect evening had been long and sometimes difficult, but every step had been worth it. Every scar, every tear, every moment of pain had led her to this life, this love, this family. She had been broken, but Garrett had helped her heal. He had treated her burns with such care, sitting by her bedside through the long, painful nights, changing her bandages day after day for months, never giving up on her recovery. And in the process of healing her body, he had somehow healed her heart too, showing her what real love looked like. Their love story had started in the worst possible way, with cruelty and pain and suffering. But it had transformed into something beautiful, something lasting. They had taken the worst day of Hannah's life and turned it into the beginning of the best years of both their lives. Years later, when their grandchildren asked Hannah about the scars on her legs, she would tell them the truth. She would tell them about the terrible day the water was thrown on her, about the cowboy who saved her and spent months treating her burns, about how love could grow from the darkest circumstances. She would tell them that she was grateful for everything, even the pain, because it had led her to Garrett and to this life they had built together. "Were you scared?" her youngest granddaughter once asked. "Terrified," Hannah admitted, "but I was also brave even when I did not feel brave. And I had help from someone who cared about me, who saw me as worthy of saving. That made all the difference." As Hannah and Garrett grew older still, their love never diminished. They remained devoted to each other, finding joy in simple things like morning coffee together, evening walks around the property, the satisfaction of a day's work well done. They watched their children thrive and their grandchildren grow, knowing that they had created something that would outlast them, a legacy of love and family. On a warm summer evening in 1920, Garrett and Hannah celebrated their 37th wedding anniversary. Their whole family gathered at the ranch for a party, 3 generations coming together to honor the love that had started everything. There were toasts and laughter, music and dancing, and at the end of the night, Garrett took Hannah in his arms for one last waltz under the stars. "Do you remember our wedding dance?" he asked, holding her close. "Every moment of it," Hannah replied. "I remember thinking that I was the luckiest woman alive to have found you." "I was the lucky one," Garrett insisted. "You could have given up so many times. When you were hurt, when the healing was so painful, when the Kellers tried to force you back. But you never gave up. You fought for your freedom, for your life, for our love. That is courage, Hannah. That is strength beyond measure." Hannah smiled up at her husband, seeing past the lines on his face to the young cowboy who had burst into that kitchen so many years ago and changed her life forever. "We gave each other strength," she said. "That is what love does. It makes us brave when we need to be, strong when we think we cannot go on. You taught me that, Garrett. You showed me that love is not just a feeling but an action, something you do every single day." As they danced beneath the Montana stars, surrounded by the family they had created and the life they had built, Hannah sent up a prayer of gratitude. For the pain that had led her to love, for the cowboy who had treated her burns with such gentle care, for the months of healing that had allowed their love to grow, and for all the years since when they had proven over and over that true love could overcome anything. The scars on her legs were just faint silver lines now, barely noticeable even when she looked for them. But the love in her heart was as vivid and strong as ever, an eternal flame that had been kindled in darkness and had grown into a light that illuminated everything around it. This was the ending Hannah had never dared to dream of when she lay on that kitchen floor in agony. This love, this family, this life of joy and purpose and partnership. It was an ending that was really a beginning, a happily ever after earned through survival and courage and the unwavering devotion of a cowboy who had seen a woman in need and decided she was worth fighting for. And as Garrett held her close and whispered, "I love you," one more time, Hannah knew with absolute certainty that she would do it all again. Every painful moment, every difficult day, if it meant ending up here in his arms, surrounded by their family, living this beautiful life they had created together from ashes and pain and healing love. The Wild West had been tamed, the frontier had been settled, but the love between Hannah and Garrett Quinn remained wild and fierce and enduring, a testament to the power of compassion, the strength of the human spirit, and the transformative miracle of true love. It was a love born from burns treated with gentle hands, healed through months of patient care, and sealed with a lifetime of devotion that never wavered, never faltered, never failed, and they lived happily, truly happily for all the rest of their days.